Hello fellow stewards, in this video I'm going to go through an endgame layout for districts and hubs. I have two other videos talking about districts and hubs for early and mid game, so I won't be going over the basics, but if you want to know more about the basics, please go check out those other two videos on my channel. In my hubs video, I introduced this concept where we can create this sort of central hub area with each hub affecting 3 districts like this. But in our new build, the key difference is we're going to try and make each hub affect 4 districts. The trade-off is that we're not going to get this 3 district adjacency bonus for heat, but we will get each hub affecting 4 districts now. Let's go over to this area that I cleared. You're going to need quite a big area to do this, and let's get the basic setup going so we can go over some of the maths. For my example, I'm just going to build 4 housing districts, and then we're going to go over how this will work with some of the other districts later in the video. We're basically going to build in lines like this. So we're going to start our first housing district like that. Then we're going to build a second housing district like this. We're going to leave one line in the middle here for hubs. Then we're going to build a third district down here like this in a line. And finally, we're going to build our last housing district like this in a line. I'm going to let that build and I'll talk about what's happening while it builds. So if you look at this setup, we've basically got 4 lines of districts and a line in the middle for hubs. And you can imagine when I chuck down a hub into the middle, for example, a heating hub, you can see we can have a tile that affects all 4 districts. Now that that's built, I'm going to expand these districts out. Those districts are now expanded, and this is generally the size of all your other districts except for housing, because housing can be expanded twice. So I'm going to expand the housing out one more time, but then when we do the industry example, we'll leave it at this size. Alright guys, we are back and we have now fully expanded the housing districts to be the maximum size that they can be. On top of which, for our example, I'm just going to build 2 buildings onto each housing block. For my example, I'm going to create a research and housing block. So we're going to put 1 research, 1 housing, dense housing block or something like that onto each single tile. All right, that is done now. And as you can see, I now have 4 districts. Each district has a research institute as well as a subsidized housing block. Now, because our 4 districts are in line like this, you can immediately see we can fit way more hubs in between these districts than we could with this original Delta build that I did. So why don't we do some maths and figure out exactly how many hubs we can fit in there. If we go into our hubs menu and we just pick any hub like the heating hub, we can go over here and we can see from where does it start hitting all the districts. Over here, obviously it's not hitting those 2 edge districts. You can see 2 of the districts are getting the full hub bonus, but the other ones are not. We have to go over a little bit more. All right, this is the tile that it starts. So you can put a hub over here. That's your first hub. You can put another one here, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and then this one doesn't work. So this setup allows you to put 9 hubs in the middle. So for my example, let's decide what hubs we want to put in the middle of, say, a research housing block like this. For example, we can see that this thing is demanding 180 heat and it is giving 55 housing. So the only thing this demands is heat. So we need to put down 180 heat reduction worth of heating hubs. Now, I know at the time of recording, the heating hubs aren't technically working at the moment. While the tooltip will reduce the heating hub down to 0, it's not actually going to reduce your heat consumption, unfortunately, but we will just put them down, and I assume this bug is going to get fixed at one point or another. So the trade-in for the heating is 25 materials, and it will reduce the heat by 40, I believe. We need to reduce the heat by 180, so we're going to need 4 heating hubs. That will reduce it by 160, and you can do 5, I guess, to really reduce it down to 0 for those cold winters. That's going to depend on your own temperature. At the moment, in this example, my temperature is -60. So let's just put down 5 heating hubs. That way it will account for most temperature drops, right? Remember, you can't put heating hubs next to one another, so you're going to have to space them out, which this build will allow. So we can put 1 down here, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So that's our 5 heating hubs. And now you can look at what else this requires. We'll let those heating hubs build first. Great, all those heating hubs are now built, and we can look at the heating requirement, and now you can see the total demand on all of these districts are all 0. So we've essentially created this housing research block that provides 55 times 4 shelter to everybody. Sorry, I have merit-based housing, but based on the normal stuff, you would have 50 shelter per block. So we created 200 shelter that takes up 0 heat. And instead we're trading off this material demand by building 5 heating hubs, and that's going to cost 125 materials. Whether you think that's worth it in your playthrough, you're going to have to determine yourself. Next, we can see what other hubs might potentially be useful for this. Now, over here, you can see these take up a lot of workforce. We can potentially chuck down some workforce hubs. So if we put down some air transport hubs, you can do something like this and reduce the workforce requirement by 4 times 15%. And I believe they do stack. Alternatively, if you have social issues, this is a great place to deal with the social issues, because you can have a fighting hub, for example, that'll reduce tension affecting 4 neighborhoods. That'll greatly reduce tension. It'll greatly reduce disease. If you put an emergency medical hub, or if you put a surveillance hub, you can greatly reduce crime. So for example, you can see at the moment my crime is notable and stable. Let's see what happens when I put down 1 surveillance hub. Now this surveillance hub has been completed over here. You can see it requires 100 workforce. It takes up heat and materials, but what it will do is if we go to our crime area, you can see it's being extremely decreased by housing districts now, and our crime is suddenly diminishing, and over time that should remove it completely. For example, we can also deal with my disease here by putting down a hub for hospitals. So we can do emergency medical hubs, and that will work in a similar way. And if you have no other social issues you need to deal with, we can just fill the rest of the space with air transport hubs and just reduce the workforce required in that area. It's going to reduce 15% workforce in all of that area. If we do some maths, 15% of 650 is around 100, and it's going to hit 4 districts, so it'll reduce by 400 workforce. So if we go here, we can see we're paying 50 workforce to reduce 400 workforce, some heat and materials. So we can build 2 of those like that and see what happens. Now with those 2 air transport hubs done, we can have a look at the numbers. It's not actually working out the way I expected. So if we look at the base requirements, it had 650 workforce. We expected a 15% reduction per hub, which should work out to 100 reduction per hub. And with 2 hubs, it should be reducing it by 200, but it's only reducing it by 60. I've done the maths on it. Basically, what's happening is it's not affecting the buildings on top of the actual district. Now, whether that's intended behavior or not, I can't tell you. Only the game devs can tell you that. But the maths that's working out is actually the base requirement for the district is only 200 workforce, and 15% of 200 is 30, and we have 2, and that's why it's adding up to 60. And just like that, you can see now our endgame build is complete. We have a fully expanded housing block. We have 4 of them, each with 2 buildings on it. The housing blocks themselves take up 0 resources. They have some reduced social things that you can put in depending on what you need. They all take up no heat because we've got 5 heating hubs reducing that. And you can see even under -60-degree temperatures, they take up no heat. Yes, I know it's not working right now, but once they fix this bug, it'll definitely be helpful. Since we had no extra social issues to deal with, we instead opted to put in 2 air transport hubs, which now reduces the workforce requirement over here down to 590. Now that we've covered the basic district layout and what hubs you can build in between the districts, I'm going to do all the maths for you so that you don't have to for this 4 district layout. Starting with the heating hub, we can see each heating hub will reduce each district by 40 heat. Therefore, in this configuration, we are trading 100 workforce, 25 materials for 160 heat. Next is the maintenance hub. The maintenance hub will reduce each district by 40 materials, and in this configuration, we would be trading 100 workforce and 20 heat for 160 materials. It is worth noting that any of these hubs that demand heat is going to be affected by your temperature. So if we look at, for example, this air transport hub, while the normal air transport hub only takes 40 heat, because I'm at -60 degrees, it is getting a -80 modifier from the temperature. Moving on, the rail hub increases production efficiency in a district by 15%. So putting one in this configuration would essentially be trading 100 workforce, 40 heat, and 50 materials for a 60% boost in efficiency. A word of caution with the rail hubs, they don't always affect every single output for some reason, and I'm not sure if this is a bug at the time of recording, but for example, you can see here I have 2 recast composite factories on an industry district that's producing 15 prefabs per week next to a rail hub over here. The rail hub is properly affecting this district, but you can see while the base output for these 12 prefabs is being increased by near rail hub, the output for these 550 materials from the 2 composite factories is not being affected. And I'm not sure if it's because the rail hub is not hitting the composite factory, but it's actually like right next to it. So I'm not sure if it's just doesn't affect buildings, but you're going to have to experiment on your own because there's so many different buildings you could be putting in these industry things and biowaste hothouses on food districts. So make sure you double check when you build a rail hub that it is affecting the resource that you want it to affect and you're not just paying this cost for no reason. Moving on to the air transport hub, that will reduce workforce requirement by 15%. You can see I already have 2 here, so we can see numerically what that means. I have 2 air transport hubs over here, and when we go to one of our districts and look at the workforce requirement, those 2 are reducing it by 60. So we can see that each air transport hub will reduce workforce by 30. So the maths on that would look something like this. You're paying 50 workforce and you are paying 40 heat and 50 materials to reduce the workforce requirement in these districts by 120. Once again, your results may vary because it's a percentage based. So it's a 60% workforce reduction. In my example, it is 120. But if you have many more workforce in each area, like 2K, obviously that number is going to be numerically a lot higher. Now, the next 4 hubs, surveillance, emergency medical, fighting, and communications, don't have any numerical numbers associated with them, but we'll just quickly go through them anyway. A surveillance hub, you're paying 100 workforce, 20 heat, and 25 materials to reduce crime in 4 districts. The emergency medical hub demands 100 workforce, 20 heat, 25 materials, and you will be reducing disease in 4 neighborhoods. Then the fighting hub will demand 100 workforce, 40 heat, and 50 materials, which will reduce tension in 4 neighborhoods. And the communication hub will demand 100 workforce, 40 heat, and 50 materials, and it will increase trust in 4 neighborhoods. Now, for completeness sake, let's just do an industrial example. I personally don't know what the use case for this might be, but I'll show it to you guys anyway in case you guys find this useful. So we, again, build our 4 districts like this, with leaving 1 row in the middle for our hubs. Now, of course, you can build this on some permanent resource tiles if you want to, if you can find the space for it. Now my districts are done. I'm going to expand each one out 3 more tiles. 2, 3, and 4. We'll let that run. With those districts now completed, we can see we have 4 rows of fully expanded industrial districts with 1 row in the middle for hubs. Let's see how many we can fit in a setup like this. So we'll grab any hub. This doesn't work because the outer 2 districts are not getting the full 3 tile bonus. So we have to start from here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and this one doesn't work. So in the industrial example, because it can't expand as far as the housing example, you can fit 6 hubs that each affect 4 districts. You are of course welcome to build a 7th and 8th hub that just affects 2 districts, but I'll leave that at your own discretion. To close out the video, I just want to talk about when you would be using all of these different sort of districts at which point in the game. I would personally suggest doing a regular district touching build like I showed in my first districts guide at the start of the game, because hubs is something that you unlock a little bit later. During the mid game, once you've unlocked hubs, you might find some of your resources have run out and you might have to rebuild some of your districts anyway. When you have to do that, it might be a good idea to use the layout here that I showed in my optimized hub guide. And finally, when you're in the extreme late game and you need to create some super complex setups that output a tremendous amount of materials, and you have the space to do so, then you might considering switching over to something like this, where 6 hubs would actually be beneficial. Of course, you will have to take into account all of your own game's needs and demands, as well as the temperature in terms of what the demands for each hub are. While I've done the basic maths for you, the actual maths in reality is going to depend situation to situation. It depends on what buildings you put in each district, what type of districts you have laid next to each other, weather, and various other factors such as temperature, the demands around your actual city, and all your laws and your research, it'll all affect it. So definitely do play around with the concept, but pay very close attention to how the hubs are actually affecting things and what resources the hubs are actually consuming by looking at the hubs themselves. And with that, I'll leave you guys to engineer your perfect cities. Hopefully these concepts have inspired and helped you. And if they have, you can feel free to leave me a like and sub. Also, you can check out some of my other videos on my channel. I have a full Let's Play series of the base game, and very soon I'm going to start a full achievement run. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you guys in the next video. Stay frosty.